Hi, everyone. This is Celia Hamilton from the Social Biz User Group. Thanks for listening to this interview. With me today is Francie Tanner. Francie is Director of the Americas at Pan Agenda. She's involved with business development, technical sales, project management, and consulting. She's a longtime speaker for several conferences and user groups, including IBM Connect and the recent Engage user group meeting. She also talks about living life and raising a family in Anguilla on her Utter Chaos blog. Hi, Francie. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Celia. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. You presented just last week at Engage, the Belgian user group event, on cloud readiness. You talked about advice for analyzing and visualizing your current IBM collaboration structure before moving to the cloud. What do you think is probably the biggest mistake people make at this point in their cloud journey, and how can they avoid it?
Yeah, great question. So there's actually two answers to that. So one of them is kind of the higher level mistake that I see almost everyone doing, which is that moving to anywhere, and in this case it's cloud. So moving to the cloud tends to be a decision that's mostly driven by desperation, lack of control, I don't really understand what's going on, frustration. So in other words, emotion. Believe it or not, that's actually what we see when we meet with high-level CIOs, CEOs. They essentially just kind of go, we don't understand what's going on in our IBM collaboration environment. We clearly can't control it. It's very expensive to support. So let's just go to the cloud because somebody said it'd be faster, it'd be easier, whatever. Except, of course, the issue that's difficult here is whenever you make a technical decision with black and white numbers out of desperation, it's typically impossible to make up the money spent on a migration. And migration cost in general is it's kind of harsh, but it's wasted money, right? So you have a functional environment today, and you're going to something else, and the cost to get you there typically can't be recovered, especially when the decision to do that is made from emotion. So, and one kind of example that I'll give you that's completely non-technical but really illustrates the point is if you imagine all the 100,000+ employees that work at IBM, for example. So IBM has employees that telecommute, and because the speed isn't fast enough, some apps aren't fast enough, we don't really understand how all our users use the resources. There's some issues with control over clients and servers and apps. Somebody decided that instead of telecommuting and each employee having their own internet line, to the corporate network, instead of that, we're going to go to the cloud. And we're going to consolidate everyone and make them drive into the IBM corporate headquarters in New York. So essentially going to the cloud is a little bit like that, right? So you take people that are geographically dispersed on separate internet lines using different kinds of bandwidth and resources that may be geographically placed in a favorable location, and you make everyone go to one data center somewhere. So basically what I call this is kind of the big traffic jam, right, which is precisely what you're trying to avoid when you go to the cloud or when you're doing your planning. So essentially, to me, this has everything to do with, why are you going to the cloud? Why are you making that decision? And typically it's just, lack of information about what is going on today. How do my employees work today? Coupled with kind of being attached to, we got to go to the cloud. Why? Well, because somebody said so. So that's usually what I see as the biggest mistake when we talk non-technical stuff.
That's great stuff. Tell me more about how to make smart cloud decisions.
Like your play on words there.
Yeah.
Making smart cloud decisions, or in some cases, smart cloud decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It starts, of course, as with anything else, with planning. So most IBM collaboration software users, and I mean that across client servers, connections, same time travel or whatever, the whole kind of product family, they don't necessarily provide a native capability to see what is actually being used. So there may be resources there to manage the environment, maybe even upgrade it, things like that. But to actually see a big picture, what is actually used, that doesn't exist today. So from a technical perspective, one of the biggest issues with factors in making smart cloud decisions has to do with understanding your environment today. Because if you don't know that, you really have no chance of, migrating to something else. So what I'm talking about here has to do with two kind of main categories, which are usage pattern analysis as well as the code analysis. So the usage pattern analysis piece has to do with how many clients, how many users do we actually have? So that's not just, what's in the address book, but how many are actually seemingly alive doing something. What kind of apps do they use? What apps are not used? What can we get rid of? Where do our users live? So geographically speaking, so I talked about the whole traffic jam bit earlier. Where are our people actually? What kind of bandwidth do they consume? On an application perspective, you really stand no chance of consolidating all your apps and putting them in some cloud center somewhere if you don't understand their dependency. So, there's still, believe it or not, there's still apps that interface with fax machines, with, yeah, I know, right? With some random DLLs on a Windows server. And, when you push all that into the cloud, that maybe somebody else manages, you lose all that. How many apps interface with the client, with the rich nodes client, things like that. So unless you kind of understand what is being used today, what can you get rid of today, then you really are at a starting point where you can then plan your smart migration to the cloud in whatever, hybrid managed, whatever form that may be. So usage pattern analysis, code analysis, those are the two big topics, and we've had a great success with that in helping our clients prepare for moving to the cloud. So, being able to see what is actually used, what can be trashed, what can be whatever, consolidated, and then incorporating all that into in an intelligent plan and making sure that we're not forcing everyone, for example, to drive to the headquarters office in New York. You know what I mean? That's basically what will make any cloud migration worthwhile.
Well, I'm going to switch gears here for a minute. Another area that you present on quite a bit is performance optimization. Last year you posted 10 tips on optimizing IBM Notes. Can you share a couple of those tips? Like, what's the number one thing that people can do that they aren't doing?
Yeah, so that is switching gears, but actually pretty much everything we do at Panagenda contains some sort of performance optimization thing, so it's maybe not as far removed as you would think, just a little more specific. So yes, with regards to any kind of data, it really doesn't make sense to migrate stuff that's not being used or not being used as much as you can. So the performance optimization, like I said, is very near and dear to our heart for those of us at Panagenda. So with regards to clients, there's a super easy gain. Well, anything's easy if you know how, but there's a super huge performance gain that most admins don't implement or partially implement, or think, even worse, think they've implemented, but it's not actually working in the form of policies. And what I'm talking about is the ODS. So I'm going to go very technical here. So ODS is the on-disk structure, so how Notes data is stored both on the server as well as on the clients. So, the good news is there's actually really fantastic stats that IBM has published about what exactly upgrade an ODS means. So what we're talking about, just for example, let me back up a step. Each version of Notes, or typically each version of Notes, has, of course, performance improvements and typically a new ODS. So a new way or an improved way of storing data across clients and servers. So when IBM makes those performance improvements, they could be realized by upgrading the on-disk structure of existing data. So, but that's usually a manual process, or it involves some kind of interaction. Okay, so for example, ODS for version 8 of Notes was ODS 48, ODS 55 is 8.5, and then now with Notes 9 we have ODS 52. But in all cases, kind of getting there requires a couple of steps. So just to kind of give you an example of what kind of difference does an ODS actually make, it can make up to an 80% difference in performance. That means speed, disk requirements, file I/O, so how much work is involved to read and write the exact same Notes data. So if you think about that, up to 80% of whatever, speed, less disk, whatever. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. This is definitely the number one thing that is available and out there that is not implemented across customers. Now, of course, we, since I already mentioned this is a topic near and dear to our heart, so we do, at Penn Agenda, we do have this solution to enable companies to do this and just about any other performance security, upgrade, consolidation, and migration task. But there is also a native IBM policy that allows the ODS to be upgraded. It is not 100% reliable, but it's a great start if you have nothing else. But yes, so in short, ODS upgrades and keeping current with whatever version of Notes you may have is absolutely the number one performance optimization tip that a lot of people are not taking advantage of.
That sounds huge. 80% improvement on anything is phenomenal. That's
absolutely
a great
and
tip.
Of course there's other environment variables involved, but we'll go with 80%.
Sure. Well, those were my questions. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
And thanks to our listeners, don't forget to check out socialbizug.org. It's a user group community built entirely on Connections, Domino, and XPages technology. It's built for IBM Notes and Domino administrators and developers. Membership is completely free, so sign up today. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SocialBizUserGroup.